What's up, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Seams, where we bring hitters and pitchers together to talk about the game so it can grow. I'm really excited about this episode. You're going to love it. Let's keep going. What's up, y'all? Welcome to Inside the Seams, where we bring hitters and pitchers together to just talk about baseball and softball and help everyone become just a better player and mainly a better human. So as always, I have my boys in the AZ with me. I got John Huizinga repping the Bigfoot. He, aka the Bigfoot Tamer, we're gonna call it what it is. That's why he goes. That's why he goes to Sedona. We got the Kleckinator, Marky Mark, repping Randy Johnson. He's your go-to person for all things, physical and dressing wise. So if you need some help with your attire, go to him. And I'm Cameron of Propel Hitting. Hope everybody's doing well, man. We got this really cool topic that we wanted to jump into and really just challenge some people with some thoughts and really help everyone kind of be better, right? And so we were kind of talking about this and said, hey, let's talk about this for a long time on this podcast episode. So we really wanted to jump into just how hard baseball and softball actually is, right? And I think a lot of times people forget how difficult it is, whether you're a parent, whether you're a coach, if you're a player, you don't know how hard it is completely because you haven't hit the peak of the difficulty, right? And so there's just this gap in understanding or remembering how hard it is. And I think there needs to be some accountability for that. And so we were kind of talking about that and just how coaches in general and specifically need some accountability on things, right? And need to be held accountable for certain things because in my experience, baseball coaching or coaches is one of the only areas and one of the only places where there's not tons of accountability, right? I mean, you can get fired, right? That happens. But there's not a whole lot else besides that. So I really wanted to kind of jump into it and talk about that. And so John said something that was really good that I think I just kind of want to kick it off with and then kind of let him give his thoughts too. And then we'll go. As he said something earlier and he said, I think in the baseball world, it's very much become do what I say, not what I do. And, I think that's very pervasive, not only in the baseball world, but in life in general. But it's very prevalent in the baseball world, baseball and softball world. Do as I say, not as I do. And there's a huge gap there. And I think there continues to be a disconnect between player and coach for that reason, right? So John, kind of what do you see in your vein of the world where that kind of shows up the most?
Well, I'd say a lot of times, parents and coaches are so removed from the game that they can watch it, let's say on TV, and they see how easy it looks because big leaguers are really good. And they forget all the steps and all the failures that it took to get those guys to that point. I mean, there's almost any guy you look into, you can find points of their career where they struggled, and that struggle is what gave them the progress that got them to where it got them. So I think a lot of times, who I call bucket coaches, which, hey, as coaches, we've all sat on a bucket, but what qualifies you as a bucket coach is when you sit there and you're just preaching how easy it is and demeaning your athletes and then expecting them to perform better because you are demeaning them. And I think that's along the lines of what we're talking about. And I think a lot of times too, you talked about accountability. And I think the other missing piece is education. Like there are some things out there for continued education for coaches, but a lot of times it's just the things that have been passed on from generation to generation to generation versus, okay, this is the best of the generation and they're going to leave us with this teaching note, or, I've been doing a certification through On Base U, and, just continuing my own education. And I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years and, been blessed to work with over 200 major league guys and learned a lot of different things. But at the same time, the day I get stagnant in that water, everything else in my environment is going to be stagnant. And I feel like it's very important that I continue to learn and adjust and adapt and maybe go outside my comfort zone. And I think that's where, if we're really going to bring player development level to the next level, then we are doing that as an example for our athletes. And then they are following the example instead of you being the exception as the coach or the parent and acting like it's super easy. Instead of, hey, well, go ahead and go take 15 ground balls at shortstop and see what happens, or go take a round of BP before you sit there and get mechanical with them and try to feel like you're going to fix something.
I think you said something really good earlier too, where you said too many people have gotten comfortable with swimming downstream and we need more salmon around. And I think that's, if you look at all the different kinds of fish, there's thousands of them, right? My brother studied them. That was his primary focus in college, was fish. And he did a couple internships where they literally did stuff with fish. And there's, he and I have had this conversation where it's like, why are salmon so different? So, why do more people know about salmon? Well, it's like, well, okay, we eat them. That's fair. But I think one of the reasons we know more about them is because they do what's different. They swim upstream. They literally voluntarily give their life to swimming upstream, going against, now, like, there's so many animals, predators, humans that know their patterns and they wait for them there, right, to be able to do it. And it still doesn't stop them from swimming upstream and going against the grain and going against what's normal. And I think that it's a reason why they stick out to us as outliners. And I think that you hit it on the head with that, where it's just like, we need to be more of us need to be salmon and not the other, right? You can make an argument where it's like, okay, well, those people, those type of fish have a different quality of this, or, whatever you would want to say, right? But they're not living as zombies, that's for sure. And they're challenging and they're strong. And it's why catching a salmon is a big deal, because they're strong and it's difficult, and all the stuff. Like, Zing and I have been fishing 3 or 4 times up in Alaska, and man, those suckers are big and strong and not easy to get on the bank. Even once you catch them, they're not easy to keep because they just fight. And me holding a salmon in my hand, I've got a picture on my phone of Zing holding this huge fish, this huge salmon. That sucker was still trying to get away from him. And eventually she did, right? We got a picture, which was cool. But eventually she got away from it. And so it's no different than as if she had, swimming upstream is no different. And so I think that's just such a huge thing, that is being able to model that is what gives people an example to follow, right? I think too oftentimes people talk about the right way, or do it my way, or this is how we do it. And people don't even know what that means. What does that mean? How do I do that? And you show people the how, right? You talk to people about the what, you talk to people about the why, but you show people the how. They don't know how to do it. That's why it's called how-tos, right? People need to know how to do it. And so if all you can give them is verbiage or information on the how, you're not giving them experience. You're not giving them, because realistically, I've listened to people's hows and not agreed with it. It happens all the time. I don't agree with how somebody does something. But if I can at least see it and understand it and know it, I can at least respect it. Say, hey, at least that's visible. At least that's real. As opposed to the other, when it's just, in my opinion, it's just control. You either can't or you won't. And I think it's usually a combination of both. But if you can't, then it's just about control, right? And so I just think it's very, it's hurting a lot of athletes. It's hurting a lot of people. It's hurting a lot of different things and stuff like that. It's just it's really hard for me to watch, if I'm going to be completely honest. Seeing it in so many veins, especially in this game I love so much. So, Mark, what's your experience been with that on the coaching side and the player side, any side?
Um, just kind of as I'm thinking about this, and just as a question back to you, do you think a part of the continuing education would be the physical side of things? So continuing to work on your craft and not necessarily learning mentally, but applying physically as well. Like, how often do you as a coach take a 3 runs of 10 off the tee, just you on your own working on your craft?
I try and do it physically a lot, because I personally hold to the belief that information, education is there to stimulate your brain, right? And the stimulation of the brain is not enough. The stimulation of the brain has to drive to something. It has to drive to a connection or forming a connection. And, like I watch a lot of mental stuff, watch a lot of like mindset, entrepreneurial stuff, and baseball, softball stuff. And so, if I see a move or I see a move I don't like or a teaching that I don't like, I'll try it, because in my opinion, that's information, even if I don't like it. Right. And so it's like, okay, am I going to stop at I don't like this information, or can I allow this to stimulate my brain? So the one person probably, or maybe more than that, but they need my understanding of this concept to be there for their success. I need to do it for that. Right. And I think that's where I'm always taking stuff off the tee. I'm always pushing myself in my communication. I'm always pushing myself in that, because it's like, as soon as I get okay with what has worked, then I will be okay with the results that worked back then. And realistically, right, I think when you take it from like a person standpoint, in marriage, right, there's this old saying of like, well, you just got to figure out your wife. Once you figure out your wife, it'll be fine, right? And I think with a lot of the people that said that, with their basic level of understanding of that, like it was meant well. But the problem is, my wife has changed in a couple areas several times in our lives together. And like we we do a lot with like the love languages stuff. We've done a lot of stuff with that, and just knowing and understanding what that is. And so like it for us, it's just common language. That's it, right? And then we go from there. And but for her to be like, well, I think this has changed a little bit. I actually think my quality time has changed a little bit. I think it's changed to this. And I think it's more this because of this. And it's when you set yourself up with, once you figure this out, you'll be good. Then you are going to, in this example, I'm going to be caring about my spouse in the way that was good 5 years ago, which isn't bad. It's not bad, but she's changed. She's developed. I would want her to. I don't want her to stay the same, realistically. And I think that's where the evolution part just continues to go, right? Of like just changing and transforming. And as you work through something hard and there's a space or gap that was there and it's not there anymore, like it's going to be a little bit different. That person's going to respond a little bit different, all the things, right? And so I think that you have to, as a coach, you have to try those things. You have to get in and hit. You have to get in and throw. Like, hey, I'm saying this, it's not landing. Okay, why? I need to figure out a better way to stimulate my brain so I can provide understanding, right? Because I think so I don't remember the stat, but I want to say it's around 85%. If you can teach something, you retain like 85% of it. And I think you could argue in some senses that it would be higher. That's why I require some of my older athletes that I work with to come and work with some of my younger athletes to learn how to communicate what they're talking about, learn how to communicate whatever, because in reality, they're teaching themselves while they're teaching the person across, right? And so I think a lot of times as players, coaches, parents, primarily the last two have a bigger responsibility because they're adults, in my opinion. When that stops, or that's not how we do things comes out, that's to me, all I hear when I hear that is well, this is how I do it and you're not doing it that way. So
Are they still doing it though, you think?
you think coaches, like our
Yeah,
coaches,
just like, are they still doing it, or has it become a stagnant thing to where that's what they know? And
I think that's 100% what it is, because you think about it, right? Most people live in a zombie state their whole life, realistically, right? If you think about it, and not everybody falls in this. Is just an example, right? Don't get butt hurt. Like if you're getting butt hurt right here, you're choosing to get butt hurt. So but for a lot of people, you sleep, right? Which is somewhat of a zombie state, right? Your brain is recouping, working through all that stuff. You wake up, the first thing you do is get on your phone or get coffee, right? Then you go do all this. You get into this autopilot mode where you take people and you drop them off. Then you go to work. You drive 45 minutes to work. You are in a zombie state at work. You're in a performance state at work. Then you drive 45 minutes or an hour back. Now that there's traffic, you have, an hour with your kids or your family, and then you watch a show, and then you go to sleep, and you do the same thing over and over and over again until you're 65. Right. And so I think it's a zombie state, right, that people get used to. And I think coaching is no different, right? Like, I've been in the coaching world, man. I've been a high school coach. I've been a full-time high school coach. I've been a college coach. Like, it's easy. Just set up a practice plan, set up the drills, set up this. And if they don't want to get better, they're not going to get better. And it's easier that way. It's less stressful. It's less lots of things. And so, yeah, I think it's 100%. I don't think it's malicious. I maliciously want to stay weak. I don't think that's what it is, right? But I think people get in that zombie state and they get tricked into it, and they look down like, oh, I only got 5 more years to retirement. And I'm just like, dude, come on, there's so much more to it than that, right? And I think I think that's where it happens, and it's the anti-salmon mindset that shows up, right? And I think that it shows up, and within that laziness, it's hurting players, in my opinion, which is always where it starts and ends for me, is the player side of it, right? Because I've experienced it myself. I watched it happen to my brother. I watched it happen to thousands of other people, and so it's like it's not okay, in my opinion, to be able to just get away with that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Do you like the title coach, like the actual word?
No, I
Or
don't
you
personally.
A player helping players?
I think it's more of that, right? I think it's I don't feel old. I'm not old, but I don't feel old at all. And so, like, I think what drives me so hard is my personal struggles as a player, and not wanting people to I want people to have to struggle. I don't want people to have to struggle with what I had to struggle with, right? Which was lack of knowing, lack of room and space to grow and learn, lack of, just any sort of individuality whatsoever, right? It was just like everything was robotic, everything was this, and like I've looked at hitters before and been like, hey, like, you're in a hard spot right now, and I could save you, but I'm not going to do it. Like, I don't know how long this is going to take, and I'm not leaving you, but I'm going to let you struggle with this because you need to. But if you have questions along the way, like, I'm still right here, but I'm not going to save you from this. I can't, because I think one of the biggest gifts that we can give to any human is to allow them opportunities to challenge themselves and figure out that they do have what it takes to do what's in front of them. Maybe not perfect. I don't even know what perfect is realistically, but just to be able to prove to yourself that you have what it takes, that is arguably the best gift anybody could ever be given. And so I 100% think I'm a helping player still at this point, right? Or a mentor just because I'm a little bit older, but I'm still a mentee at the same point, right? So it's that blend, right? Of, man, I ask myself when I'm in the posture of sitting with my mentors, what's my posture? What am I asking? What am I looking for from them? Because I am realistically, when I'm seeking out mentorship from somebody, it's 100%. I want this from you because you got it. And if you're willing to give it, I'll take it. And so I try and position myself in that when I'm working with somebody or talking with somebody, it's okay, what's your posture in this? What are you trying to get? I'm here to give it to you. If I can't give it to you, I'll find somebody who can. But what's the posture? Because then it's blending. You're going between mentor and mentee, which is exactly where it should be. Because I think that's a really, really, really important point there. I think that a lot of people you shouldn't miss, right? Is remember, it's got to stay player to player. Almost. That's really, really important. No matter how old you get. Just because you're 50 and you can't hit the ball as far, if you got out there and there was a competition, your competitiveness and player side would come in. Well, why can't that come in more? You'd run your mouth, you'd talk crap, you'd do all that stuff, right? Kid throw you a fastball and you'd hit it and you'd run your mouth under your breath a little bit, right? That's a good thing. And so, yeah, I just think it's super important to keep that, and that just goes back to what Zing always says about don't forget about how hard it is. And you do when you just get into the coach mindset and mode of, well, I gotta coach them in this, or I gotta do it in this, and albeit that may be true, it probably is true, realistically. But is it for right now? That's always the question that we have to ask ourselves: is it for right now? And I think most times, 80% of the time, no, is the answer. It's not for right now. And I think if you listen to yourself talk, or you've done any kind of communication training or anything, you will hear that the points that you emphasize are the points that you are yourself working through right now, or that are most passionate to you right now. And so that's really good. And I believe that is what comes through to these guys, is not what we're saying, but what we're passionate about, right? Because as you study yourself and you listen to yourself talk, it's why? That wasn't even in the notes. Why did I talk about that? Or that wasn't even on the PowerPoint. Why did I talk about that? I talked about it because I'm going through it. I'm experiencing it. I'm struggling with it. And as that happens, it sounds completely different. Then here's knowledge, here's do's and don'ts, as opposed to, man, this is hard. This bridge sucks. Building this bridge sucks. And here's why. Here's that. Now, make sure you use these kind of nails, because I tried 78 other kinds of nails and it didn't work, right? That you'll hear that when you listen to yourself talk. And I think what I don't hear in a lot of baseball coaches is that I don't hear that kind of stuff. It's not I was just talking to my wife about that this morning. I said, it's not stimulating to me. Listening to baseball people talk is, for the most part, not stimulating to me. That's why I don't go to conferences. I don't care about your catching drills. Sorry. Nothing personal. I'm sure they're great, but I don't care. It's not stimulating to me. Because realistically, I've probably come up with a drill that does the same thing too. Just pulling it out of my head, right? So it's very unstimulating to me for the most part. There's some guys in the baseball world that are tremendous, right? And I think that's why I love these conversations that we have because it's so stimulating for me. But for the most part, in the baseball world, it's do what I say, not what I do. And that's just so unattractive to me. And I think it's wrong, and I think there needs to be some accountability because far too often it really does a number on players. And it's I would almost liken it to like when you can almost always tell when someone's been in the military, like the first time you meet them, because like they're very particular, they're very exact, they're very whatever, right? Because that's just very much what's praised and fashioned in the military. Not saying one way or the other it should or shouldn't, but it's got a feel to it. And I feel like baseball coaches have a feel to them too. And I think that's why I'm very not drawn to that in a sense, right? Like from a coaching side of it, the military guys are like, all right, well, what do we need to be doing every day? I'm like, hey, like that's really good, but don't ask me. Your kid's the one that just went through all of this whole thing we've been doing for the last whatever long. Let's all three have a conversation about that. Because it is about discipline, but it's about discipline with buy-in where it's possible. Sometimes you got to discipline yourself, and it is what it is. And I don't like getting up at 4 a.m., but I do it. I do it. But it's buy-in. I wake up before my alarm now because I'm bought in. Before it took me 3, 4, 5 alarms to get out of bed. Not anymore. I'm in. It's completely different, right? And so I think that's where it's so important to understand that there are controllables, but most of this is not controllable. Very variable. And I think that's where I see it as like, I see baseball as like 4 walls. The game of baseball is 4 walls. There's only 9 innings. There's only 3 outs. There's 4 balls. There's 3 strikes. There's things that are non-negotiable, right? Like umpires are going to miss pitches, like all the stuff. But I think what we want as from a coaching standpoint is those walls to be as wide as possible. So it doesn't get like overcrowded, right? There's like those houses that you go into that are like 3,000 square feet that feel like they're 6,000 square feet. And it's like, I think that's what we want, right? We don't want to feel enclosed because certain things it's like, hey, dude, I can't move that wall. Like it's got to be there. Look, give me something here. You got the whole other plate. Give me something here. I'm giving you a lot of space here. But when you do give space and you do give respect there, like you're not going to run into that as much, I think. And so, yeah, it's not good. It's not good to have those walls so constricting when there is an opportunity to let the walls be less constricting. And so it's a choice a lot of times to make those walls so constricting. I don't think it's malicious all the time, but I do believe that it is a choice to make it make it constricting. Again, some things, hey, look, dude, I can't make it bigger. I can't scoot the wall back any farther. I've given you as much as I can. But those aren't the kind of conversations that most people are having. Right? It's like you bumped into the end table, so now you're going to run 25 pulls. Right? And again, I'm not even saying you don't bump into the end table if that's a deal. Like that's fine, right? Like it's fine, but yeah, I just think the ability to have the walls as wide as possible helps a lot, right? And I don't see that as an effort being made to do that, right? Because then we don't give our players the freedom to be upset. Hey, be upset with me. Like, am I so sensitive as a coach that I can't have a kid challenge me? I'm not even saying that I think there are right places and right times, right? That's fair. But do I always 100% of the time do it in the right place and the right time? No, I don't. So therefore, if I'm holding them to that standard and not myself, man, that's a special kind of hypocrite. Special kind of hypocrite, right? And it's just just for me, it just always goes back to what Zing says, man. Like, you can't forget how hard this is. You can't forget how hard this climb is. Any part of it. That's why somebody like Alex Ramosi is super cool for me, right? I say it a bunch, and I'll say it again. Like, man, he lost everything he owned 3 times. He looked at his wife and said, "Hey, you should leave me because I'm broke." Right? Like, that's real. That's real. That's modeling what you preach, right? That's the deal. That makes a whole lot more sense. And I just don't see that kind of transparency there. And then what happens is the lack of that gets thrown onto players, right? And it's like what a lot of y'all don't know listening to this is that Marky Mark was a really good hitter. He still is a good hitter. And like, Mark's got such a awesome, cool personality that I don't think a lot of people like take the time to get to know, and they just sort him in a box that's so far incorrect of the truth, right? And I think, just listening to him and doing relationship with him, like, some of his coaches were that way too. And I don't think it's malicious. I really don't. But it's like, man, like, if you just took a second to like understand what made Marky tick, or like Zing, man, like Zing was throwing freaking snowballs in Michigan to drive up his velocity, right? Like, that's not a whatever. And I think what we do is we gravitate to the people that are like us, and those are the people that they, talk about. And well, we got John over here, and John's getting his extra work in every single time, 30 minutes before, an hour and a half after practice every day. And it's like, yeah, but you also have another guy who can get what John can get done in an hour and a half. He can get done in 20 minutes. And so you're elevating somebody based off of preference, not actuality. Right. And I think what that does is then that like tells people, hey, what you're doing that's not right. What you're doing is incorrect. What you're doing is not it. And then what a lot of young people are going to do, they're like, all right, well, cool. I'm just not going to do it. Then I'll keep myself from getting beat up, and I'll just do it this way and be the funny guy or be this or be whatever. And I think it's crippling because guys won't grow in their understanding, because they won't try to get more understanding and more recollection of things. That's what it comes down to. Right. And for people like us, we can take education and then turn it into other stuff. I think what the problem is, not everybody's like that. Not everybody's trying to be a salmon. Right. And so they take the education and they just stop there. Right. And it's like, dude, the education is to stimulate your brain. That's it. Stop and start right there. And your brain should take it and go from there, and that's where there's just a huge loss, right? And I think it just cripples the players more than anything, right? And if we remember, and if we go back to what you said about the player helping a player teaching a player perspective, like, that will help us bring us back to center, realistically. And I think we lose that and we don't get that. You know what I mean? I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts?
I'd say you said it well when you said time and place. Like, if we're talking about, let's say myself, for example, there's a time for me to be a player and play, and there's a time for me to be a coach and coach. And I think some people, it can be daunting to wear the coach hat, because the coach hat should be all about the player, versus as a player, it should be all about you and all about how you can help the team. And I think, sometimes finding that balance is difficult. And I think that's why we see guys that struggle with it, and it's just one of those things. But when we're looking at the player development, I think it's like we've talked about before, it's you teach a man to fish, you feed him for his life, versus if you just catch a fish and give it to him.
Yeah.
And for example, that could be sometimes you know how to fix a kid and you just give him the cue, versus asking him a question and giving it to them. And that's, to me, that's being a responsible coach and being somebody who's teaching somebody how to grow and teaching somebody how to think, versus somebody who's sitting there and being the authority figure or whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it,
It's really
with the
good.
right and wrong
Mm,
based on their vision.
that's good. What do you,
But I
Mark? What
think
do you?
sometimes too, when you're coming through here, you gotta. We talked about the how, right, and that's part of the player thing. But I think part of the coach responsibility is understanding the why, because a lot of times coming up, if we questioned why, the ego would jump in, and it was like, well, no, you can't question me. It's because I said so, and it's my way or the highway, or however it's been said. I mean, I've heard it said a lot of different ways. It's you can fill in the blank, but it's the blank way. This is the way that we do it. And then without diving into the why, to me, that's where you're losing guys. And as a coach, it's like if you can just take a second and you can explain to somebody, okay, yes, this is how we do it, but this is also why we do it. And if you fail to have a why, then you need to find something else to do, right? If you have a why, then you can get guys that buy in. I mean, I had a parent at the end of the session last night was in for a couple minutes, and he said something to me that kind of stuck out. But he's like, these guys really listen to you. Like they're listening, they're respecting what you say, and it's like, well, that's because I'm actually listening and caring what they say, and it goes in a circle versus this high and mighty thing that's looking down on the whatever. And I think that's where there's sometimes a disconnect where it's like, oh, these kids or this generation or we used to do it like this, and it's like, well, okay, well, it's a different day and age now, and you got to adjust or adapt, right? And if we're still stuck in what used to be and how things used to work, then we're in trouble because things have changed. The only constant is change. So you got to adjust and adapt in the game. And that might be the way that you coach. It might be the way you communicate. It might be the fact that you actually give somebody a why versus maybe last generation like me would just put my head down and run through a wall for you. But I can tell you I'd do it even more if I understood why I was doing something.
Mm,
And
that's
then it
good.
could help me troubleshoot within that where I'm like, okay, if this is how I'm supposed to do something, this is why I'm supposed to do something, and this is the way I'm doing it now. And now how do I, bridge that gap between those things?
It's so good. Yeah, I love that. If I'd have known the why, I would have done it even more. It's really good. And I think it's one of those that to me just hits on something that's super important because a lot of times people assume that, like take the why for instance, somebody says, well, I didn't used to have to know that in order to buy in, or I didn't used to have to know that to whatever. Um, and it's like that's fair, but you would have if you knew more. You would have if you would have done more if you knew the why. That's so
Well, would
good.
you take advice from somebody who's not in a position that you're in? Right. And that's where it's like, I think a lot of times we have coaches that expect people to follow them. I've had this conversation with a lot of people. And they're like, well, why do these guys do what you tell them? But then if I tell them, they fail to do it. And it's like, well, because you're failing to walk the walk. These guys are leading me or following me, perhaps. Let's say we're even on a hike and we're walking up a mountain, and if I follow a certain path and everybody follows me, that's almost like the responsibility that the coach has, right? Where it's like, hey, I have responsibility as a coach to lead people. And they're not going to just follow what I say. They're going to follow what I do. So
Mhm.
if we're going on a hike and I'm like, hey, I'm going to stand at the bottom and you guys go to the top and we'll see you when you get back. It's different than saying, hey, either A, I'm going to lead you up the mountain, or B, I'm going to be the caboose and I'm going to follow you all up and we're going to go do this together. And I think that's where sometimes that bridge gets lost when guys forget how hard this game is. And it's like,
Mhm.
hey, remember your struggles, because your struggles are probably pretty similar to what their struggles were. Now, the solutions to getting out of it might be different, and that's okay. In fact, that's what makes the world go round. There's different solutions to the same problems.
No, I heard it said the other day that if you want to live a fast-paced life, don't have kids.
Hmm.
And if you're willing to have kids, then you're willing to buy into a longer a longer life in a sense of it's going to take longer. And the example that the guy gave was, instead of putting your kid in their seat and buckling them up every single time because y'all need to go, whatever, why don't you take something off the plate so every time you get in the car, they can try to figure out how to put the seatbelt on, or they can try to figure out how to scan the thing in the grocery store, or all the things.
Mhm.
And I think that concept is what we're talking about. There's certain times you're just gonna have to you're just gonna have to do it. It is what it is. But if there's never any two-wayness to the street, you're gonna get what you get. You're gonna get people turning down the street and breaking the rule and and pissing everybody off and doing all the things that comes from somebody driving down a one-way street the wrong way. But I think that's what it comes down to is, if you're willing, if you want to do that, if you want to be a coach, if you want to have all these things, then you're buying into it taking longer than what you planned for. Because you can't complain about enabled kids and then don't give them the opportunity to learn how to put the seatbelt on by themselves. That's why at that point, I do this with my 4-year-old. At that point, she knows how to do it now. She knows how to do everything. At that point, now I can be a coach and hold her accountable to what her ability is. Like, no, wait a minute. You know how to do this. You've done it a bunch of times. You can do it. What's going on? Like, why are we not just taking this and conquering it? That's a completely different conversation than if I've never allowed her the struggle of putting both legs in one leg hole in her pants. Right? Like, or whatever. And that's the whole concept of that, right? Being able to, if you want to demand the things that you want to demand, you have to give them opportunities to learn how to produce what you're asking them to. If you don't, you're literally, I mean, that it's literally like it's being a psycho. Realistically, I won't let you do this, right? Like, think about it. Kids can't call games. They don't get green lights. They can't run through it. They can't run through a stop sign. They can't do this. They can't do that. And then what are all the people complain about now? These kids don't know how to think. Because you've been calling pitches since 9. Listen, at 9U, it's this one. Here it comes. Right? At 12U, it's fastball in, fastball out. And it's like, let them screw up. Because when they
Once
do,
again, teach them why. Teach them why you would go to this spot. Teach them how to read a swing. Teach them how to. And yes, that takes longer, but at the same time, if we're looking to build guys that are going to be able to go to the next levels, then we have to give them the ownership.
Absolutely.
And let them fail.
And
sometimes you got to mess up to learn.
I would say almost 100% of the time you do. Realistically, to build a solution, that's what it takes. That is the requirement. That's the admission ticket. People think the admission ticket is good intentions, or I think it's hard work. And it's like, no, it's not hard work. Sorry. It's not hard work. That's a given. That's part of it. Like that just is. The failure is the admission ticket. Right? Are you willing to look like crap? Are you willing to look stupid in front of people? That's what it takes. Because if you are, when you're hitting well, or you're striking out the side, or you're getting longer, you're getting to go past your pitch limit because they trust you, that's when it shows up. Not somewhere else, right? Not looking stupid in the bullpen or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know. Mark, what's your perspective on any of that?
I think a lot of it for me too, just personally, is about the relationship of that two-way street, creating that relationship to where it's, yes, we're getting good at baseball, but I also want you to be a good human and make a difference in this world. So it's not everything's coming from me. It's asking the questions. It's creating that relationship. And giving them that space to be able to try things and fail and be okay with all of it and learn and grow. Just experiment and experience.
What does that derive from you or for you?
I think I've always had a knack of just wanting to help people, especially when I was young. And so I think a lot of it is just helping or just having people see what their best version of themselves is and figuring out what that is or what that looks like. So I think for me, a lot just always wanted to help people when I grew up. And baseball's the platform.
Mm-hmm. Just the vehicle, right? We were talking about that. We were talking about that the other day. It's awesome. I love it.
I think a lot of it also stems too from, and I still have my struggles, but with my throwing and my whole playing career, and I think a lot of it came from these kinds of coaches where I don't think I ever really knew why or how. It was just I was told to do it without either being shown it or experiencing it. And I think that's what a lot of it stems from now too, is like it's not what I say, right? This is not my career. I'm not here for me. Like I want you to be the best version of you. So let's navigate different paths and journeys on how to get to where you want to be. It's not just one way. There's not a cookie cutter. You have to fit in this box.
Well, that's why it's so cool.
Maybe you want to play leapfrog from box to box.
I love that. That's great. It's so good. Well, I think that's why, like, you can look at every single hitter who's ever made contact with a ball, solid contact with a ball, line drive. If you brought up pictures of every single one of them, they would all look the same. But how they got to that was a completely unique platform, was a completely unique creation, right? You take someone like Aaron Judge, and then you take someone like A-Rod or Barry Bonds or whoever, polar opposite thought processes, polar opposite, but they got there, right? And I think there's just a beauty of teaching people how to do that so they then can conform within baseball. Because again, baseball has four walls, that you have to do things with. Sometimes, like, situation comes up, you got to do something that's not your A result or not your A swing or not your A whatever. I really want to punch you here. Well, it's like, okay, but we need a ground ball. So it's going to demand things from you. But if you're involved in your process and the creation of the solution, you then have the ability and the know-how to conform it to what the situation is called for. And I think that's what's been lost so much, is the ability to know how to do that. Because it's like, if you do these 4 drills, your velocity go up 6 miles an hour. It's like, great. Now what? Like, now what?
Still need outs.
Still need outs. Like on the hitting side, we're getting the velocity part figured out a little bit, like it's still really hard, but we're getting the velocity part figured out, right? We're figuring out how to hit the high spin, at the top of the zone. We're figuring out how to do that. But it's like the other part is still impossible when you can do that, and the human brain just can't do all that stuff. Right. I mean, I specifically remember when those guys were throwing to those Arizona State guys, and I told one of the guys, I was like, hey, like, if you'll bait him into thinking if you'll bait this one pitcher into thinking that he can throw his fastball by you, or you're looking for something else, then he'll give you another one and you'll be able to hit it. So it may mean that, like, the first at bat of the first 2 at bats he gets you. But, like, realistically, listen, like, we can't hit them all. Like, and his breaking stuff is so flipping good that, like, you really don't want that part. Like, and so if you can bait him into that, he'll give it to you. and you'll be able to hit it, right? And that's exactly what happened, in the next at bat. It's like was baited there, and it's like, okay, I was like literally just wait for one. Just no matter what comes, wait for that one. It'll be like 2-1 probably, and just freaking be okay with a single to right center. And he smashed it, right? And so that's the part where me as a coach knowing knowing what's across, right, is good, but that's where like helping them have their build the solution is so important, because then you can tailor it, and then you can conform it to what the game is, because the game does take some conformity, right? It's not completely uniqueness. You can't do whatever you want all the time. And so the beauty of uniqueness and understanding your individuality is so you can use that within the four walls of the constraints that you're in, whatever that is, whether it's anything, life, marriage, business, hitting, pitching, fielding, whatever it is. Regardless, you can, if you understand you can do what you need to do for what's in front of you. And I think that just goes back to what y'all been saying that's so good, where it's just, if they see it and they know that you're doing it, why wouldn't they want to do it? And that's the thing I think that has been lost a lot with certain levels of coaching, is the allure and the trust, the immediate trust with collegiate coaches, high school coaches. It's not there in the same vein. And so in a vein, those coaches have to earn it, right? And that hasn't always been the case. And so realistically, it's you do have to earn it. And I think that's why people listen to Zing the way they listen to Zing. That's why people listen to Mark that's why they listen to me. Doesn't mean that I don't mess stuff up. I'm the first one in the screwed it up line, So, but I think that's why, because those kinds of conversations are happening, and it's earning, where it's like, hey, I messed up a cue. Like, hey, like, that's on me. I'm the first to admit it. I try to be, as soon as I become aware of it. Hey, right here, I messed it up. That's on me. Like, I'm sorry for what I did, messed you up on. People are afraid to apologize, man. Like,
You're wrong
when they're wrong, right? That's it, right? And that's where it was. I love what me and Zing were talking about this, and I love what he said. He's like, man, like, don't apologize for something if you're not gonna do it different, because like I don't want to hear it. Like, it's just words. And I love that.
Sifu. Whereas, like, if you say sorry, then that means you're going to fix it. Otherwise, or for me, the one that always gets me is my bad, right? Like, there's a pitcher playing catch with a catcher. He throws a ball. The catcher has to go get it, and he says, my bad. And we all go, oh, I thought the shortstop threw the ball to the catcher this time. Who else's bad would it be? Right? But it makes them feel better. So a lot of times I'll call and be like, hey, does that make you feel better? Because he's still chasing the ball. Keep those words to yourself next time and just hit him in the chest. Like, do it.
Do it. Be about it.
Instead of giving yourself a pacifier and being like, oh, my bad.
That's so true.
That one gets me going. That one, there's only a few of them. That's one of them. And then the other one for me, and this does fall into that kind of category of what we're talking about. I think once you've reached, let's say, a certain level of understanding with your guys, is, for me, when practice is going on, there's no forward asking questions. If somebody asks me a forward asking question, player comes up to me, I say, hey, go get water. And he comes up to say, hey, are we going to do this, or this? My first answer is go get water. That's all we're doing right now. Let's be present enough with what we have. If you're failing to be present enough to go get water, then how can I expect you to be present enough to be in the box in a 2-2 count with the game on the line?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the time and place thing where, there is a time and a place for a coach to be the coach and a player to be the player.
100%.
But then there's also the time that we need to open the floor and make it the two-way road, like you guys have talked about, where it's, okay, we're going to have a conversation here. And a lot of times at the end of practice or training, we like to bring guys together and ask them what they learned. And I think that's where you can really learn your guys, because you might have really, whatever, let's say you were focusing on whatever that day, let's say first and third situations, and you were coming up with the way that we handle things. But then when you go through and you talk about it, they might have a different way of saying the same thing. And then that gives you a chance further down the road to reach that kid, because you saw how he processed it and then how he communicated it, you know, versus like somebody else. And if they just give you the same answer of what you said, that's not what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for ball players, not robots.
Mm.
Robots just regurgitate what I said, and because I said it, versus somebody that if I taught them how to think, they can actually go through the scenario and play it out with their words and explain it the same way.
Mm-hmm. On robots can only think what they're programmed to think with, right? As soon as there's a wrinkle thrown, they can't do it. They absolutely can't do it. Me personally, I would much rather have people that are, you know, are willing to risk challenging, as opposed to just like brown nosing, personally, because I can handle the confrontation. That's not a big deal. The conversation of, hey, that probably wasn't the best time to bring that up, is a whole lot easier than, hey, dude, like, here's a wipe, you got some brown on your nose, right? That's a whole different kind of conversation, to where that's a cycle. That's not a good one, right? That's a way more harmful cycle than, hey, bro, like, good on you. Let's just, you know, maybe a little bit different time. That's completely different, right? And so I think it's just important to but that's where this whole thing stems from. This acorn that we're talking about, right, is the do it. And the players don't know how to do it all the way. That's why they're there. And expecting 14 to 22-year-old young people to know exactly what you mean, or how to do it, or why it's done that way, or why you're asking that, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen, because I could ask, you know, a coach's wife, hey, what does he mean by this? And she would give me an answer, but it would be wrong in some vein. And that person lives with him. So it's like, so if she don't even know it completely, then how the heck is a 15-year-old who freaking is doing what every 15-year-old does gonna know it? They're not going to, because they're stupid. They're 15, man. Like, they're doing what they're supposed to do. And that's the acorn we're talking about, not the. That's where Zink can take an on-base U certification, and it just stimulates his brain so much. It's not that he just needs the knowledge. It's the challenge of. It's the development of. It's the, I don't know, probably lots of things.
I'd say in a lot of ways, because I mean, a lot of the on-base U stuff has a foundation in Tom House and some stuff that's, you know, been passed down for years. But then at the same time, there's the Titleist Performance Institute piece that is in there. You know, a lot of the information I've been aware of for 15 to 20 years, but the application of it from their perspective is what I've really gained some insight on, where it's like, oh, okay, I've done it this way, maybe I could try doing it this way. And then all of a sudden the two meet in the middle, and then it's okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it. And this is something that's important to us, you know. And I think that's where you kind of your vibe attracts your tribe, right? Your vibe attracts your tribe. But if you have, like for us, we're focused on player development, ideally we're attracting players that need development. Right, versus the ones that come in maybe with a mindset where they already got this. And I mean, we know what the game does with that mindset anyways, but it's a humbling game. So I think as coaches, we have to remain humble if we're going to really get down in the trenches with these kids.
Yeah.
Continuing to work on the craft.
That's it, right? And what John just described is doing it, right? It's he could have had somebody that he's had for a year and they've been working on a concept and it hasn't landed. But then Zing goes through this because he's doing it, he's modeling what he preaches. And then now he brings that to that kid, and the kid goes, oh, the kid may not recognize in the moment, hey, he must have gone through a certification and they were talking about this. But what he is gonna notice, right, is that's a little difference. That's a little different. Oh, okay. Well, so when he's talking to me about getting one day better, maybe that's what that means. Okay, I can do that. That's the difference.
Well, you have other coaches too, right? Like we've got a guy, Justin Miller, that trained with us, and now he trains pitchers as well. And he was in yesterday, and he came in at the end of the lesson. Literally, the kid had like 3 throws left, and he said something to him, and he was unaware that we had already talked about that 10 minutes earlier. But the way he said it was just a little bit different, and you could see that light bulb almost go off at the kid. And for me as a coach, if I sat there and was like, this is my guy, I taught him this, you're getting in the way, it's like, no. This is all about the student. And I think that's why sometimes too, like, you can sit around, I know a lot of other good coaches that say things differently from each other, but they reach guys differently, and it's like we could literally sit in a circle with 10 of us and we all say something that has the same thing, but we all say it just a little bit different.
Yes.
And we're all going to reach a different percentage of the kids. There's sometimes where Mark will say something that I said 10 minutes earlier, but he said it in a different tone and with some different words, and all of a sudden you see, hey, 3 kids understood what I was saying, now the other 3 maybe understood him, and the other 3 are still in the corner trying to figure out how to pick up baseballs. And you're never going to reach them all, right?
You can't.
That's a true story, but
That is a very true story.
I love that. And that's a great tangible example of what that looks like, modeling what you preach, right? And I think that's the whole goal, right? That's the whole thing that we wanted to talk about, right? It's just like model what you preach and find somebody to hold you accountable with it too, because it's just not good enough. What you did before isn't just good. It's not good enough anymore. It's just not.
Friends do every day. JJ Watt said it, right? It's in football, but it's the same thing. We talk about all the time, but that's, people are like, how do you keep getting one day better? Well, part of it is just your mindset and even the idea or belief that there's something you can improve on today.
Yeah.
And it's we watched one video and then have a throwing party for 2 hours yesterday. Just hop right into it.
I love it.
This gets for 2 hours.
I think it's, to kind of cap off what we're saying too, it's like the knowledge versus the application. Like, I think there's a lot of coaches that know, but are they applying? And then are you walking the talk? Because the kids, especially the young ones see it quicker than anything.
Facts.
And I tell guys all the time, it's like, you can what's the famous phrase? You can't BS the BSer, right? And we'll keep it clean here. But the idea too, where it's like, if you go into a group of kids that has no idea who you are, do they care how much you played? Do they care what do I go up to a group of 9-year-olds and be like, oh man, you should see, this highlight film of what I did when it's like, no, this is about these kids and they feel energy, right? And if you come in and you're fake, or you're preaching something like whatever, you come in and you're preaching health and you're out of shape yourself, then how are you going to, reflect something on them or give them something to maybe mirror or to get a concept from? It's like, if I'm a healthcare professional and I'm telling you should be healthy and I'm unhealthy, are you going to listen to that person?
Subconsciously,
I would hope not. I think there are definitely some people who will just follow blindly, but I think the majority of people are awoken enough, and I think part of baseball is awoke. I think there's still a lot that's asleep, but I think there's people that are awakened and they've gone to other places like golf or tennis or these other sports that are maybe further ahead with the mental game or further ahead with some technique stuff. And now all of a sudden they're questioning things that before they were unallowed to question. And I think that's the healthy growth, right? Like we should be allowed to ask the uncomfortable question and have the uncomfortable conversation. And we're allowed to be wrong. Or we're allowed to think about something differently, but as long as we're keeping the player in mind and their development in mind versus, your ego or what you are attached to, then I think we're all moving in that right direction.
I agree. And that's the bottom line, right? That's what it comes down to, is bottom line is that. And yeah, that's a great summary with it, honestly. And I think that's the whole deal. And that's where if you don't like having stricter guidelines, if you don't like having a stricter, more demanding requirement, then don't be a coach. You don't like it to where people are looking to you with how to climb the mountain, then don't be a figurehead, and give back all the clout, give back all the other things that you have too, and give it back, because that's what comes with it. And the people that you just got to look at that, and you just got to understand that that's the case. And because we're called to more, we have to be more. And if you don't like it, then you can be upset, you can cry about it, all those things are fine, but you either get over it or don't, because it's the admission ticket to being a leader. And that's just how it is. Don't like it, then go somewhere else, do something else, in my opinion. And nobody will think anything else of you, right? It's like, can't handle it, it's totally okay. Don't. But stop hurting people while you're doing it, because we're getting tired of having to deal with it. I promise you that. So, well, y'all, I think there's a lot there for everybody to kind of glean from and take some notes on. A lot of really good stuff and tangible stuff there from Mark and John and stuff too. So hope you all enjoyed that. And so fellas, amazing as always. Appreciate y'all, and just the wisdom that you walk with and sharing it with everybody. And yeah, just appreciate y'all and everything that y'all are doing for the baseball community and everybody else too. So y'all are gems, and I'm very lucky to be able to have these conversations and know y'all like I do. So
We appreciate you, everything you're doing.
I appreciate y'all listening, and we'll see you on the next week's episode.
Much love.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm sure you were able to get a lot out of that. So because of that, make sure that you share this, right? Make sure that you put it out on social media, on your stories. Make sure that you subscribe, give us a 5-star review, because our passion is to see the game grow, and our passion is to see you become the best baseball or softball player that you can. So go ahead and do that for us, and I can't wait to see you on the next episode.